We're going to talk a bit more about Ukraine now with our guest today to discuss what to make of this apparent change in stance from Donald Trump. I'm joined on the line now from London by Jaroslava Barbieri. She is a specialist in Ukraine politics and society, as well as Russian foreign policy at the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House think tank in London. First of all, thank you for joining us here on France 24. We do appreciate your time. Perhaps I could start by asking you what you think motivated Trump. Is this a real shift in his position? Does it amount to any more than just words? What do you think?
Good afternoon. I think that we should take Trump's statements with a pinch of salt because, as your colleague rightly pointed out, Trump has consistently been very contradictory in its statements towards Russia and Ukraine. And so far, since his coming into office, he has consistently tended to adopt a more favorable position towards Russia, trying to pressurize Ukraine into making concessions that would be more advantageous to Russia. I think that what's happened now is that he has seen that this previous strategy has not yielded any results, particularly in the aftermath of the summit in Alaska. And so he potentially is now seeing Russia as being the weakened party in a way, because it's positioning itself as a superpower and it has not been able to make significant advances over 3 years into the war. So I would interpret these statements as a potential tactic to try and see whether he can put pressure on Russia that would be short of imposing secondary sanctions and sort of having enough RAM that would shift the blame for not ending the war on Russia's stubborn position and on European leaders continuing to purchase oil from Russia, but certainly not of Donald Trump, and maintaining this image as an effective peace broker. That's very important to him.
And in that Truth Social's post, he, of course, called Russia a paper tiger. Moscow has already hit back at that. They said, first of all, we're not a tiger, we are a bear, and bears are not made of paper. Do you think he rattled Putin with that comment? And do you think that was his primary intention, to get under Putin's skin?
I think his primary intention was making sure that he would not look humiliated and ineffective, because he has portrayed himself as this effective peace broker, the only man capable of bringing Putin to the table and bring an end to the war. So I'm pretty confident that he's trying to avoid looking humiliated. But I think there's another statement that also came out from the Kremlin, which is that Russia has no option but to continue its war. So I think it's very clear that Russia's maximalist objective towards Ukraine have not changed throughout all of this time.
He also says that Trump, in that post, with the help of Europe and NATO, of course, the US is the key member of NATO, but he doesn't specifically talk about help from Washington, does he? What do you think Zelensky should read into that?
Absolutely, you're very right. He has not unambiguously said that Washington would be throwing its support behind Kyiv and European countries. However, he did say that he would continue to preserve the mechanism that allows non-US NATO member states to purchase US military equipment to support Ukraine. And he said that they would be able to use it however they see fit. So I think that he is looking for an off-ramp to trying and save face and maintain momentum in terms of his efforts so far have not been fruitless. However, he's trying to put the pressure on European leaders to really basically take really responsibility for their own security and not take US support for granted. So this European effort to try and keep the US on board for as long as possible as they continue to try and bolster their defense capability, I think we should expect that to continue in the near future.
And as well as this military war in Ukraine, Moscow does appear as well to be engaged in some kind of campaign to destabilize NATO, perhaps with this violation of the airspace of NATO countries, numerous countries now, either with jets, drones, sometimes disruption. We had the shutdown of Copenhagen airport yesterday after unidentified drones. Russia, of course, says, we are not responsible for this. What do you make of it? What do you think is going on? Do you think Russia is behind it? And what do you think Russia is trying to do?
I think we have extensive evidence to suggest that Russia is trying to test the ground, test the waters, test NATO's readiness, ability to respond to these incursions into NATO's airspace. And what's worrying is that this escalatory move seems to be accelerating in time. And of course, it's a very common tactic from the Kremlin of doing something and then denying its involvement. So that's certainly not surprising. But what's important to stress is that on the one hand, in the West, we say that Moscow only understands the language of strength. And then so it's very important that NATO maintains a consolidated response to these Russia's incursions, because certainly I think that Russia is preparing for a potential confrontation with NATO. It's preparing its strategic reserves for a potential extended confrontation in the near future. And I think that NATO member states should be preparing for all possible scenarios. And I think that certainly something that has not worked in the past is to not show strength and resilience against Russia's destabilizing operations. And so I think that here we're entering a very delicate phase, and it's important that NATO member states show strength, resilience, and potentially even strengthen their rules of engagement to make sure that NATO's deterrence capability remains credible.
And then, what do you make of, even from Washington, we've had sort of two lines. We had Marco Rubio really evading questions over whether Washington would intervene if NATO airspace was violated. He'd said, nobody's talking about any intervention unless there are attacks. And Trump said, well, it depends. Is NATO divided on this?
I think that European NATO member states are a bit worried about this ambiguity coming from Washington and this lack of understanding the extent to which Washington would be supporting European states in the case of an escalation with Russia is something that is holding them back. However, we're seeing more and more consistent efforts and statements coming from European member states in trying to come up with a consolidated and coherent response to these escalatory moves from Russia, and sort of making sure that they will not be ignored, that sort of they need to prepare for the worst case scenario. I think that this reality is sort of dawning on European leaders.
I'm afraid we're out of time there. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Jaroslava Barbieri of Chatham House think tank in London. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and analysis with us here on France 24.